Hi, my name is Megan, and I'm 26 years old. I've never been the kind of person who cries easily. I grew up learning how to tighten a leaking faucet, patch drywall, and start a stubborn lawnmower long before I ever learned how to bake cookies. My dad, Henry, believed in raising me with grit, and I took that seriously. But nothing could have prepared me for the phone call I got 3 days ago, the one that flipped my world upside down. "I sold your father's house today," my stepmother Melissa said smugly over the phone, her voice slicing through me like ice. "It was never really yours, Megan. You need to learn respect." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I simply stared at the floor of my one-bedroom apartment, jaw clenched, heart thudding in my ears. That house wasn't just where I grew up, it was where my father and I built a life. Every hallway, every creaking floorboard, every pencil mark on the kitchen doorframe held a memory. But Melissa's cruel tone only made one thing clear. She thought she had won. What she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that I had already met with Dad's lawyer, Martin, weeks ago. I had followed my father's quiet instructions after he passed away, and I was holding on to a truth Melissa would never see coming. That house still had one story left to tell, and this time, I would be the one writing it. Dad met Melissa 5 years ago at a local community fundraiser. I still remember the first time he brought her home. She wore a pale green silk dress, her blonde hair pulled into a flawless chignon, and a smile so polished it nearly reflected the chandelier light. She shook my hand with both of hers and said, "So nice to finally meet Henry's pride and joy." But something about the way her eyes flicked over the living room, pausing on the antique mantel clock, the Persian rug, the framed family photos, sent a chill through me even then. I was 21 at the time, busy finishing my senior year of college, and Dad seemed genuinely happy for the first time in years. Since Mom walked out on us when I was 4, it had been just me and him in that Victorian house on Maple Street. He'd built it nearly from scratch, brick by brick. To see him smile again, to see his eyes light up when Melissa laughed at his dad jokes, I wanted to believe it was real. So I smiled too, even when it didn't reach my eyes. They were married 6 months later in a small, elegant ceremony held in our backyard. I remember clapping as they exchanged vows under the blooming cherry tree Dad had planted the year I was born. Melissa looked radiant, but even then, she held his hand like she was already staking a claim. After they married, I noticed the changes immediately. The cozy living room furniture I'd grown up with disappeared, replaced with sleek, modern leather pieces that looked like they belonged in a magazine rather than a home. Family photos were taken down, replaced by abstract art that matched her color scheme. Dad said nothing. He just smiled and told me, "She likes things clean and new. It's her way of feeling at home." But it never felt like home after that. Not for me. Even though I had my own apartment by then, I visited every weekend. Melissa would greet me politely, but only when Dad was watching. Her compliments were laced with subtle jabs, her smiles too wide. And when she thought no one was looking, her expression hardened. Cold. Calculating. I ignored it for as long as I could, until Dad got sick. It started with fatigue. Then came the shortness of breath. At first, Dad brushed it off as age, maybe stress from work. But the truth couldn't be ignored for long. After several visits to the doctor, he was diagnosed with congestive heart failure. His heart was struggling. And so was he. I'll never forget the day we sat together on the back porch, him holding a mug of chamomile tea he hadn't touched, me gripping the wooden armrest so hard my fingers ached. "It's manageable," he said, forcing a smile. "But I'm gonna need some help." And I didn't hesitate. I filed for family medical leave from my marketing job the very next day. I packed a suitcase and returned to the house on Maple Street, expecting to find support from Melissa. Instead, I found cold silence and a note on the kitchen counter. "I'm at the spa. Don't wait up. M." As the days turned into weeks, Melissa's presence in the house became almost ghost-like. She claimed she had migraines that made it impossible to drive Dad to his appointments. She said the sound of the oxygen machine in the bedroom was ruining her sleep, so she moved to the guest room. And when Dad needed help getting to the bathroom at 3 a.m., it was me, not her, who supported his weight and whispered encouragements through the tears. She was always too tired, too busy, or simply unavailable. Yet somehow, she was never too tired to go shopping or book spa days. She'd leave early in the morning and return in the evening with bags full of designer clothes and luxury skincare products. All while Dad sat quietly in the living room, reading old books and pretending not to notice. But he noticed. One afternoon, after a particularly rough night, Dad was sitting in his recliner with a blanket over his legs. Melissa had just left, claiming she had a volunteer board meeting, though I knew she was meeting friends for lunch downtown. I brought him his medication and sat beside him in silence. That's when he reached out and took my hand, his grip weak, but his eyes sharp. "Megan," he whispered, "when I'm gone, go see Martin. He has something for you." I didn't know what he meant, but I nodded. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Dad didn't trust his wife. He trusted me. Dad passed away just 3 weeks after that moment on the recliner. The night he died, I was holding his hand. The oxygen machine hummed softly beside the bed. His breathing slowed until the silence became unbearable. And just like that, my world cracked in half. Henry Mitchell, the strongest man I'd ever known, was gone. The funeral was held on a crisp Thursday morning. The sky was clear, but I don't remember the sun. I only remember Melissa's dress, a sleek black designer gown with a matching handbag and dark sunglasses she didn't really need. Her makeup was flawless, not a single tear in sight. She wept in front of people like it was a performance, gently dabbing her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, sighing dramatically, and telling anyone who'd listen how deeply heartbroken she was. But I saw the truth. I saw how she glanced at her watch multiple times during the service. I saw how she barely looked at the closed casket. And I saw the way she scowled when people offered their condolences to me instead of her. To Melissa, my grief was inconvenient, almost insulting, as if my love for my father was somehow stealing the spotlight she wanted all to herself. After the burial, while everyone gathered in the house for coffee and condolences, I walked into the study and closed the door behind me. I sat in Dad's old leather chair, already looking out of place among Melissa's modern furniture, and let myself cry properly for the first time. That night, Melissa sat across from me at the kitchen table, stirring her tea slowly. Her voice was flat when she said, "You should start thinking about what personal items you want to keep. I'll be making some changes soon." That's how she said it. No warmth, no empathy, just business. I didn't answer her. I didn't trust myself to speak without breaking. But in the back of my mind, I remembered his voice. "Go see Martin. He has something for you." I made the call the next morning. Martin's office was exactly as I remembered it, lined with old law books, thick wooden furniture, and the smell of aged paper and coffee. He had been Dad's attorney for over 20 years, but more than that, he had been his friend. A calm, steady presence during moments like these. When I entered, Martin stood up and greeted me with a quiet, knowing look. He didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss." He didn't have to. "Megan, thank you for coming," he said softly, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. "Your father made sure we had this meeting scheduled. He was very clear it needed to happen, privately." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Martin opened a drawer and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He set it on the desk between us. "About 6 months ago," he began, "your father came to me after his heart condition worsened. He had growing concerns about Melissa, concerns he didn't want to burden you with during his final months." I leaned forward, my stomach turning. What kind of concerns? That she had married him for his assets. That she was preparing for life after him, without you in the picture. Martin opened the envelope and slowly laid out the documents. They weren't just papers. They were protection. 6 months before he died, my father had legally transferred the deed to the house, our family home, to me, through a quitclaim deed. The paperwork had been properly recorded with the county. The tax records, utility bills, and homeowner's insurance had all been updated quietly. Melissa had no idea. "Your father wanted you to have the house," Martin said firmly. He didn't want it to end up in the hands of someone who only saw dollar signs when she walked through the door. Tears welled in my eyes as he handed me a smaller envelope. My name was written on the front in my dad's handwriting. With shaking fingers, I opened it. My dearest Megan, asterisk if you're reading this, then I'm no longer there to protect you face to face. But that doesn't mean I'm not still standing beside you. The house is yours. Not just because I promised, but because I know what it means to you. What it means to this family. Melissa only sees property. You see memories, history, love. Be strategic. Don't let her drag you into a war. Let Martin guide you. Trust your instincts. I'm so proud of the woman you've become. Love always, Dad. Asterisk. I sat in silence, gripping that letter, my eyes burning, my chest tight. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't forgotten me. He had quietly, cleverly, lovingly secured the one thing Melissa thought she could take from me. He gave me back my home. I walked out of Martin's office holding the letter like it was a shield and a sword at once. Legally, the house was mine. But Martin advised caution. Melissa doesn't know the deed was transferred, he reminded me. If we move too quickly, she'll drag it into court, claim Henry was unwell or coerced. But if we let her act recklessly, we build a stronger case. He was right. Melissa believed she had all the power now. Letting her play that out, letting her show who she truly was, it wasn't just strategy. It was justice catching up in silence. So, I followed the plan. I packed up the irreplaceable things quietly. Old photo albums, my grandmother's quilt, the leather-bound journals Dad kept in his nightstand. Things Melissa might toss or sell just to spite me. I waited until she left for a spa appointment to sneak in and collect them. She didn't even notice. Then I moved in with Julia, my best friend since high school. Her spare room became my base. Her kitchen table turned into my war desk, where we cataloged everything Melissa did next. And she did plenty. 3 days later, when I returned to the house to grab the rest of my things, I found the front door locked. My key no longer worked. I stood there stunned, my bag in one hand, the other clutching the doorknob like it might give in if I just turned harder. Then my phone buzzed. It was Melissa. "Oh dear," she said with a syrupy voice. "Did I forget to give you the new keys?" It completely slipped my mind. "Security's important, Megan. There've been break-ins, you know." Break-ins? There hadn't been one on Maple Street in 5 years. "I need to get the rest of my things," I said, trying to keep my voice level. "Of course, dear. Next Tuesday. Between 2 and 4. I have a tight schedule." Next Tuesday. She was playing games. But I didn't flinch. I let her schedule her little power move. When I returned the following Tuesday at 1:50, dressed in jeans and a hoodie, I found a "Coming Soon" real estate sign planted right on our lawn. Through the window, I saw strangers walking around inside with a realtor, Vanessa, one of Melissa's polished, high-heeled friends from her country club circle. Melissa had scheduled an open house during my designated time. I sat in my car across the street and took photos. Then I called Martin. "She's showing the house," I said flatly. "Can she sell it?" "Not legally," he replied calmly. "But this is good. Every step she takes without your consent builds our case. Let her dig the hole deeper." And so, we waited, patiently, painfully but deliberately. Every open house, every buyer walked through, every lie she told became a brick in the wall that would close in on her soon enough. Melissa had no idea the house she was so proud of showing off wasn't hers to sell. A week later, I walked through the front door for my scheduled pickup, only to feel like a stranger in a model home. Melissa hovered like a supervisor in a department store, her arms crossed, her mouth tight. Every room looked different, like the soul had been vacuumed out. Family portraits were gone. The warm rug from the den had been replaced with some stiff gray thing that matched nothing. Dad's favorite chair, the old, worn leather recliner where he used to read the newspaper every evening, was missing. "Where's Dad's chair?" I asked. "Donated," she said breezily. It was outdated. Honestly, it smelled like medicine and sadness. I felt the sting rise up in my throat. That chair was where Dad had napped after hospital appointments, where he once held me the night I cried over my first real heartbreak. And she tossed it like it meant nothing. In the study, the bookshelves were bare. Dad's rare, cherished first editions of Hemingway, Steinbeck, even his signed copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, gone. Where are his books? Melissa didn't even look up from checking her nails. Some man from the university came last week. Gave me $800 for the whole set. Seemed fair for old books. I had to grip the edge of the shelf to stay steady. And it didn't stop there. Upstairs in the bedroom, I noticed my grandmother's antique jewelry box missing from the dresser. The same one that held my mom's wedding ring and the pearls passed down for 3 generations. Did you move the jewelry box? She raised an eyebrow. Perhaps you packed it already. Or maybe the cleaning service misplaced it. They were very thorough after your father passed. Translation: she'd either sold it or hidden it. That jewelry wasn't about carats or resale value. It was legacy, a symbol of women in our family who had endured. And now it was gone, like everything else she hadn't earned but was so eager to cash in. Every time I returned, more of the house was unrecognizable. She held private tours. She hosted showings without warning. She replaced warmth with polished, sterile staging props. It felt like watching someone dress up a body after it's lost its soul. At night, I sat with Julia in her apartment, a cup of tea in hand, the ache in my chest impossible to shake. She can't get away with this, Julia said. Martin says we wait, I whispered. Let her finish showing the world who she really is. The more she sells, the deeper her liability goes. That's what Dad wanted, to protect the house, even from her. I gently pulled out the envelope that held his letter. I wasn't just holding paper. I was holding proof. And soon, Melissa would have nothing but her greed left. 2 months had passed since Dad's funeral. 2 months of Melissa dismantling our home piece by piece, as if every memory she destroyed gave her a twisted sense of control. Then she called me. Her voice was bright, chipper, as if we were old friends. Just wanted to let you know, I'm officially listing the house next week. The market is hot and I want to maximize my return. Return? On what love? Legacy? Years of memories she never helped build? That house has been in our family for generations, I said, my voice catching. And now it's mine, she snapped, the sweetness vanishing. Your father left it to me. Maybe if you hadn't been so cold to me during our marriage, things might be different. I almost dropped the phone. Cold? I was the one who fed Dad soup at 2 a.m. I was the one who rubbed his back when the pain made him tremble. I was the one who drove him to his appointments while she shopped for a new handbag. You're making a mistake, Melissa. She let out a cruel little laugh. No, Megan. Your father made a mistake, thinking you deserved anything. Actions have consequences. You should remember that. She hung up, and I immediately called Martin. She's listing the house. His voice remained calm. Let her. The moment she tries to sell a property she doesn't legally own, she steps from morally questionable into criminal territory. We'll act at the right time. Still, watching the real estate listing go live days later was like being stabbed. The pictures made me sick, room after room stripped of soul. The caption read, "Stunning Victorian with modern updates. Offers above asking welcomed." Within hours, there were showings lined up. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched from a distance. Sat in my car down the street as couples walked in and out. As Melissa waved to them from the porch, wearing her widow mask like a crown. She even told a neighbor she was downsizing after her heartbreaking loss. What she was really doing was cashing in on a home she didn't own, selling a life she never helped build. Every lock she changed. Every photo she discarded. Every antique she sold without permission. It was all evidence. And she had no idea she was walking straight into a legal trap of her own design. Then came the call I knew was coming. 3 weeks after the listing went live, Melissa left me a voicemail, her voice practically gloating. I sold your house to a lovely couple, the Bradfords. They move in next week. I'm sure they'll appreciate it more than you ever did. She had no clue that by saying those words, she had finally given us exactly what we needed. I didn't call her back. I didn't need to. Instead, I called Martin. She says the Bradfords signed a deal. Closing is Monday. Martin's voice lit with purpose. Perfect. Now we act. That same afternoon, Martin contacted the title company, sent over the recorded deed, and officially froze the sale. The house legally belonged to me, and the buyers had no idea they'd been duped. Melissa, however, found out within the hour. My phone buzzed again. Her name flashed across the screen. I let it ring. Again. And again. Then came the messages. What did you do? Fix this now. If you think you're clever, you're not. This will ruin us both. I forwarded them to Martin. Then that evening she crossed a new line. Melissa showed up at Julia's apartment. She banged on the front door, shouting my name loud enough for neighbors to peek through blinds. Julia and I stood behind the peephole, barely breathing. Megan, this is insane, she shrieked. We need to talk before you destroy what's left of this family. Family? She had no claim to that word. Not anymore. When she finally left, she taped an envelope to the door. Inside was a handwritten note. You don't understand what you've started. Let's resolve this quietly before it becomes something neither of us can control. Too late. Martin scheduled a formal legal meeting for Saturday morning, 3 days before the supposed closing date. All parties would attend. Melissa, the buyers, Andrew and Rebecca Bradford, both their real estate agents, the title company representative, Ms. Bennett, Martin as my attorney, and me. Melissa tried to shift the meeting to her attorney's office, but Martin shut that down instantly. The legal owner chooses the venue, he said. And that's Megan. That Friday night, I barely slept. Julia helped me pick out an outfit, a navy blazer and soft blouse, professional but firm. I stood in the mirror, repeating Dad's words to myself. You have every right to stand in that room, and you have nothing to prove to someone who never saw your worth. When I arrived at Martin's office the next morning, Melissa's car was already there, gleaming as always. The Bradford's SUV sat beside it. I paused outside the door, took one long, steady breath, and walked in. The conference room was thick with tension the moment I stepped in. Melissa sat at the far end, dressed in an elegant black dress with a pearl necklace, her hair styled to perfection, still performing for an audience that no longer believed her. Next to her was Vanessa, her real estate agent, nervously scrolling on her phone. Across the table were Andrew and Rebecca Bradford, the unsuspecting couple who thought they'd bought a dream home. Their agent, Scott, flipped through a stack of papers, his brow furrowed. At the other end sat Ms. Bennett from the title company, calm but clearly bracing for impact. Martin stood as I entered, nodding respectfully. Thanks for joining us, Megan. Please have a seat. I sat beside him, my heart steady despite the storm around me. Melissa didn't look at me. She looked through me. Can we start? She said briskly, glancing at her watch. I have a hair appointment at noon. Martin folded his hands. Ms. Bennett, would you like to begin? Ms. Bennett opened a folder and placed a document in front of everyone. During the standard title verification for 247 Maple Street, she said calmly, we discovered that the property is not legally owned by the seller, Mrs. Melissa Mitchell. Rebecca gasped. Andrew leaned forward. What? He said. Ms. Bennett slid a copy of the deed across the table. According to county records, the house was legally transferred via quitclaim deed to Megan Mitchell 6 months before the passing of Mr. Henry Mitchell. That deed was properly notarized and recorded. That's a lie, Melissa blurted. Robert left me that house in his will. Yes, Ms. Bennett replied evenly, but the will was drafted before the property was transferred. At the time of his death, Mr. Mitchell no longer owned the house. Therefore, it was not his to leave to anyone else. Vanessa looked like she might throw up. Scott's mouth dropped open. Andrew spoke next, his voice low but furious. Are you telling us we've been negotiating a deal with someone who doesn't own the property? That's exactly what I'm telling you, Martin confirmed. And every action Melissa has taken, showings, negotiations, marketing, even accepting a deposit, is illegal under real estate fraud statutes. Rebecca slammed her hand on the table. We gave notice on our current home. We've packed. Our movers are scheduled. Scott turned to Vanessa. Why wasn't this caught in the beginning? Vanessa stammered. Melissa said the will covered everything. We expedited the title search to meet her requested closing. Martin remained calm. There's more, he added. We have a notarized affidavit from Mr. Mitchell's oncologist confirming he was mentally sound during the time of the transfer, along with statements from his nurse and several family friends who witnessed his clarity and intent. Melissa's face drained of color. This is a setup, she snapped. He was on medication. Megan manipulated him. That's when I finally spoke. I took care of my father every single day, while you were getting manicures and shopping for condos in Florida. He knew exactly what he was doing when he signed those papers, and he did it because he saw through you. Melissa's voice shook. You turned him against me. No, I said. You did that all by yourself. The Bradfords stood. We expect full restitution, Andrew said coldly. Not just our deposit. We want compensation for storage, temporary housing, and legal costs. Ms. Bennett nodded. The deposit is already frozen in escrow. We'll handle the rest. Martin turned to Melissa. You have 48 hours to remove your personal belongings from the property. Anything that predates your marriage stays. An inventory specialist will be present. 48 hours? That's impossible. You've had 3 months to empty what didn't belong to you, I said. Melissa stood, her voice brittle. This isn't over. Actually, Martin replied, it is. And your next conversation will likely be with a fraud investigator if you choose to fight further. Her mouth opened to speak, but no words came, because finally there were none left. Saturday afternoon. The storm had passed. Now came the cleanup. Martin had arranged for 2 off-duty officers and Janet, the inventory specialist, to accompany me to the house on Monday morning. We weren't taking chances, not with someone like Melissa. When we pulled up, her luxury SUV was already in the driveway. Several half-filled boxes cluttered the front porch. The front door was open, but the warmth that had once defined that house was long gone. Melissa appeared in the doorway looking like someone else, hair undone, dark circles under her eyes, her designer blouse wrinkled. The mask she'd worn for so long had finally cracked. I need more time, she said the moment I stepped out of the car. 48 hours isn't enough to sort through 5 years of marriage. You've had 3 months, I replied, walking past her. And you spent it selling what wasn't yours. She moved aside reluctantly. Inside, I could barely breathe. Empty picture hooks. Bare walls. Furniture covered in cheap moving blankets. The scent of fresh paint mixed with something else. Loss. Grief. Violation. Janet moved through each room like a surgeon, clipboard in hand, checking off everything still present and flagging everything that wasn't. The officers stood by silently, their presence making sure Melissa wouldn't try anything. In the master bedroom, I noticed the closet was half empty, but something felt off. I pulled open the sliding door and saw a pile of boxes shoved in the corner labeled Goodwill. Curious, I opened the top one and gasped. Family photo albums. My grandmother's jewelry box. Dad's old fishing journal. The very things Melissa had claimed were water-damaged, misplaced by the cleaning service, or donated to charity. All hidden, ready to be discarded or sold under a lie. Julia, I called. She stepped in and quickly began documenting everything with her phone. Melissa appeared in the hallway. I was going to return those, she said, trying to sound sincere. I turned to her slowly. In a box marked Goodwill? Hidden in your closet? After telling me they were ruined. She didn't answer. Back downstairs, Janet continued noting missing items. Dad's antique desk, the grandfather clock, the Persian rugs, custom light fixtures. Most had either been sold, replaced, or were simply gone. When we reached the living room, Melissa leaned against the wall, arms folded. What about the things I purchased? She asked as Janet flagged a sleek new sofa. If they were bought with your own money, and you can provide receipts, they're yours, Janet explained calmly. Otherwise, anything acquired using joint marital funds or Henry Mitchell's account stays. Melissa flinched, but said nothing. By late afternoon, her personal belongings were packed and loaded into a small moving truck. Her furniture, at least the few pieces she could prove were hers, followed. As the movers shut the truck's back door, Melissa turned one last time toward the house. I did love him, you know, she said quietly. In my own way. I met her eyes and said nothing. Because what do you say to someone who turned your grief into a transaction? She climbed into her car. No final insult. No parting smirk. Just a long, hollow glance at the home she tried to steal. As she drove away, I stepped onto the front porch, the key to the house clutched in my hand. I was home. Not in just any house, but my father's house. My house. And this time it was safe. The silence after Melissa left was deafening. I stood in the entryway for what felt like hours, staring at the staircase I'd run down every Christmas morning as a child. The wood still creaked in the same spot. The light still fell just right through the stained glass window above the door. But the soul of the house, it had been wounded. And now it was time to heal it. I spent the next few weeks reclaiming every corner of that home. I painted the walls back to the warm colors Dad had loved. I replaced Melissa's modern minimalist junk with cozy, meaningful touches, some bought from antique shops, others rebuilt from memory. With Martin's help, I filed insurance claims for stolen or damaged items that had been covered under Dad's homeowner policy. Some heirlooms were gone for good, but we filed civil claims to recover financial compensation for Melissa. It wouldn't bring back my grandmother's pearls or the smell of Dad's books, but it was something. Janet's final inventory report helped seal the legal proceedings. Melissa agreed to a settlement. She paid a 5-figure restitution for illegally sold items and signed a legal agreement to never contest the property transfer again. According to Martin, she had used the remainder of Dad's investment accounts, which she had inherited legally through the older will, to buy a condo in Florida. She didn't walk away empty-handed. But she didn't walk away victorious, either. I invited Andrew and Rebecca Bradford back to the house one weekend, just to speak face-to-face. They had been innocent in all this. To my surprise, Rebecca hugged me tightly. Your father must have been an extraordinary man, she said. He was, I replied, feeling tears I no longer feared. He gave me everything, including a way to protect what mattered most. A month later, while cleaning out the attic, I found something unexpected, a loose floorboard near the chimney. Inside was a small fireproof box, dusty but intact. Inside, the original deed to the house, signed by my grandparents. My mother's wedding and engagement rings. A USB drive labeled for Megan. That night, I plugged the drive into my laptop. My father's face appeared on the screen, thinner, paler, but his eyes still twinkled. If you're watching this, he said, then I'm gone and you followed my instructions. The video wasn't long. Just a few minutes of love, advice, and warmth. He talked about life, about forgiveness, and about the home. This house is just wood and stone, he said softly. But the life inside it, that's what makes it worth protecting. Fill it with joy again. Fill it with people who care. Don't let bitterness live where love used to. I watched it 3 times. Then I got up and made tea. And slowly, I began filling the house with life again. Julia came over every Friday night. We painted walls, restored Dad's workshop, hung up photo frames, and replanted the flower beds. I hosted dinners in the old dining room, filled the kitchen with the smell of cinnamon and garlic, and sat on the porch swing during quiet evenings, just like Dad and I used to do. Melissa had tried to sell it, but he had left it to me, and I finally understood why. Sometimes people think power is loud, dramatic, explosive, but my father taught me it's often quiet, strategic, patient. He didn't just give me a house. He gave me the strength to protect my legacy. He gave me permission to fight without rage and to win without hate. If you've ever had something taken from you or watched someone try to erase your story, remember this. Silence doesn't mean surrender. And letting someone fall into their own trap, that's a kind of justice too. Thank you for hearing my story. And if this reminded you of your own journey, of reclaiming what was rightfully yours, I'd love to hear it. Because maybe the most powerful stories are the ones we don't let others write for us.